Good evening. Mayor Wade is in Ghana this week, and so I'm going to preside over the meeting. My name is Brian Pinkston. So we'll have the call to order and the roll call. The May 5th, 2025 Charlottesville City Council meeting will come to order. Ms. Thomas, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Councilor Oshrin? Here. Councilor Payne?
Here.
Vice Mayor Pinkston?
Here.
Councilor Smith?
Here.
All right. Is there a motion to approve or amend the agenda?
I would move approval of the agenda.
Second.
All right. Please cast your vote. The motion passes. This meeting, as always, will be divided into three sections. First, a work session to hear and discuss presentations that do not require council vote. Second, it would be followed by a closed session or recess. As of now, there are no items for a closed session. And then finally, the city council business meeting will start at 6:30 p.m. So we will begin with reports, and we'll begin with the United Way of Greater Charlottesville Prosper program, and we have Robbie Cooper here tonight. Thank you for being here, Robbie, the United Way president, and she'll present.
Thank you. Do I need this, or can you guys hear me? You guys can hear me okay? Great. And somebody will advance slides?
Yes.
Thank you, Ashley. Excellent. Well, first off, thanks for having me down today to talk a little bit about Prosper, which is a program United Way's been working on for the past couple of years and finally launched in January, and we're really excited to share a little bit more about it with you all today. So next slide. So you've heard United Way present before, so I know you've heard a little bit about what our vision and mission is, but just to remind everybody, we're here for a strong, equitable community where everyone can thrive. And we align with the city around that messaging to be a place where everyone thrives. So a lot of the work that we do really, I think, aligns with the strategic priorities of the city, which is to make sure our community members have all the opportunities that they need to be able to be economically stable. So a lot of the programs we offer, and some of the ones I'll talk about today, are really about how do we lift families up and remove barriers, and how do we do it well in partnership with other nonprofit organizations. United Way really is about convening and collaborating at the essence of the heart of what we do in our community. So next slide. So strategic alignment, financial stability is one of the core areas of United Way. We also work in early school readiness, which intersects and is a good partner to financial stability, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. But for a working family, childcare is essential. To be able to work, you need childcare, so we'll talk about how the two kind of go hand in hand. But today we're here to talk about Prosper, and a little bit about how we collaborate in this sort of ecosystem of family support system, and again, how we choose and hope to work with the city on this particular program. We do work with the city in a lot of different ways, but this is something new that we're proposing. And I should say, has been funded. Last year was the first year, or this year, that we've gotten some funding for it. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what we hope to do next year if we were to get an increase in funding. And the bottom line of all these efforts, as you can see there on the screen, is to increase median income, increase the number of small businesses in our community, decrease our poverty rate, decrease the number of households who are paying 30% or more for housing. We all know the affordable housing crisis, but one of the ways to tackle it is to help people increase their income so they can afford the housing that is in Charlottesville if they choose to live in Charlottesville. So next slide. So existing collaborations, and I'm going to just add a little flavor to sort of some of the numbers around these. So we currently administer pathways for the city. We have since COVID. When COVID hit, we actually partnered with the Community Foundation and the county and put together an emergency response program. And as the year rolled on, we decided that the partnership had worked so well, we decided to stay on work with the city, DDS, on this program. So we're in year 5 now. It's been a fantastic program overall, working with Misty and her program in human services. This year we dispersed $727,000 in funding. We do get a 7% admin fee for that. It's about $55,000. So every week we disperse checks that help folks, mainly from being evicted. There's many nights where we run down and have to drop checks off after work to make sure folks don't get evicted, but a lot of it's around utility assistance and things of that nature. So it's been a great program. We do the Early Learner Scholarship Program. That's a contractual arrangement we have with the city. We currently get $215,000, and we place about 26 children, so that's full day, full care for a child. So if you're a working family making about $50,000 to $60,000, which many of our families do, child care right now ranges anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000, depending on the age of your child, and so that can be a significant portion of a person's income. And if you're Alice, which we'll talk about in a moment, which is asset limited, income constrained, but you're employed, it's essential to be able to work to have child care, and not just child care. not just daycare, we want you to have quality childcare where you're getting the type of intervention and support so you can get to kindergarten and be prepared to learn and do well with your more economically advantaged peers. So this has been a long-standing relationship we've had with the city, and one that's been really prosperous for, I think, United Way and the families that we serve, and hopefully the city. Go to Grow is another program that we do throughout the region, but we work with city residents. This year we're serving 516 families that have applied through the program. This allows the family to access a full-day child care situation, but all the other wraparound services in the community they might need. This program serves people that are under, all of our programs serve people under 300% of the federal poverty level. But particularly in this program, we serve a lot of families that can be even under the 150 mark, so some of them are in the social safety net. So we help place them with a child care center that's near their home at a price that can work with a subsidy or whatever support we can offer them, and what other services they might need in the community. Envision Enterprise Grants is something that we've done now for about 4 years. We actually do a partnership with the Economic Development Department, Chris Engel. We just finished up our most recent round of grants to small businesses in the community. For that, we've done 26 grants over the past 4 years that amounts to $260,000. For that program, we give $50,000 at United Way. The city and the county each provide $50,000, and we all partner to do grants of about $10,000. So that's been a successful program, and we're hoping to continue that as well next year. Mixed delivery, we have right now 79 year-round child care placements. That's a program that's supported by the state. Ultimately, the federal government, Department of Health and Human Services, funnels money through the Virginia Department of Education. We're a sub-grantee. We're one of 9 regions in the state that gets this award. We're on our second round of awards. We just got it again for 3 years. Right now, we have 520 placements across 22 counties. So we've expanded to Winchester, Harrisonburg, Stanton, Augusta, Waynesboro, and then here in the Thomas Jefferson Planning District. But how it shakes out here in our community is we support 79 families with those full-day, full child care placements. And then we work with a couple centers, YMCA and Barrett are the 2 big partners on that program. And Head Start, we applied for the Head Start grant this year when it was relinquished by MACA. We just found out today we should hear early July. It sounds like it is currently, as of today, not being removed from federal funding at this moment, so we're positive and hopeful that that will go forward. We are the only applicant we understand in our region, and so it seems favorable that we'll get it. If we do, we'll have 16 children attending Head Start here in the city, working with the city preschool program on that. And then most recently, thanks to Ashley doing some work with the city here, we applied for the Southern Cities Economic Initiative, which is to build, and we're going to be building a business plan for early childhood education, and that's all about building economic prosperity and inclusion through access to quality childcare, basically training the teachers that will be in the classroom, many of whom really see this as sort of a job, and if there's a better job that comes along, they'll leave the classroom, and so we have a lot of transition for children with trying to recruit and keep childcare workers. So giving them access to a CDA or some sort of basic childcare training is really crucial, and we currently have a real shortage of teachers, and so this is a way to help with workforce development around something that's really needed in the city, and this grant opportunity we were just presented with. So that gives you a sort of a big picture of all the things that we currently do already with the city, and then we'll talk a little bit more about Prosper. So next slide. So just again, a little bit about Alice Working Families. Is it okay if I ask you guys a question? Is that appropriate, or can I ask? Okay. How many have heard about Alice? Are you familiar with the term Alice? So mostly for, okay. So you can kind of see up there, we've got almost 3,500 households in the city of Charlottesville that are considered Alice. You can see what that means from an income perspective, just to kind of help for a family of 3. We serve a lot of single moms and with 2 children. That's a pretty normal scenario for United Way. And you can see if their budget is about $58,000 a year, with child care 2 under the age of 5, rent being what it is, leaves very little resources for anything else. And this is a scenario we deal with day in and day out in terms of the clients that come to United Way. They're not in the social safety net, meaning they're not receiving any social services, but they don't make enough to really succeed and to really get out of sort of the cycle of living right at the line of poverty. And so everything United Way focuses on, and our new strategic plan is on supporting Alice families in the city, in the county, and in the Thomas Jefferson Planning District. Next slide. So current needs among Alice families, just gives you a little flavor of what we're seeing when families come in. First off, 64% are the primary income earners in their household. They all work at least 30 hours a week. Roughly 50% are single female head of households. 48% are Black households and 32% are white households that we currently serve. And in our financial resiliency task force work, we're able to do surveys and see where the most support is needed. And you can kind of see in that little chart there, financial coaching is a need, home ownership, housing ownership, of course, transportation is big, and we have some programs to address that. And then childcare is really the number one area that families are looking for support. You can see some of the partners that we work with listed there at the bottom. So one of the questions is, is anybody else kind of doing this work with Prosper? And the answer is not exactly what we're doing. Network Work does an incredible job serving families, workforce development support, but they're mostly serving the social safety net folks, and then we're serving Prosper. Yeah, go ahead.
That last bullet there, 48% of Black households are ALICE, 32% of white households. Is that in the city, or is that of the ALICE households, 48% are Black, 32% are white?
That's in the city of the families that are in the city, the 3,500.
Of the 3,500 that have been.
Correct.
Got it.
But we can shop data, however, right? So we are looking at city today, but there's some really good data across our region, what's happening. So if council's interested, we can send that along and share it out through Sam's office. So, yeah.
So your last statement puzzled me. I'm not sure I heard it correctly. Is it that 48% of Black households in Charlottesville qualify as ALICE?
Of the 3,500 that are currently considered ALICE, 48% of those identify as Black.
Okay, that's not what your graphic says.
Are you talking about the one here on the right?
On the left.
Roughly for Zoom.
If you want to say 48% of ALICE households are Black, that's what I'm interpreting your
Yes.
oral statement. Okay.
It
And
is.
32% of ALICE households are white.
Correct.
Okay.
And then other, we have Latino, of course,
Sure.
and other populations that make up the
Okay.
balance. But we can make that more clear on the slide. Next slide. So the evolution, I've been here before. I've talked about the Financial Resiliency Task Force. That was a group of organizations that came together, all of whom you've heard of or worked with: City of Promise, CIC, Habitat for Humanity, MACA, Network Work, New Hill Development, Piedmont Housing Alliance, UHARA Foundation, and United Way got together summer of 2019. We worked for 5 years. We worked on what was a problem we thought we could solve together in terms of supporting families to achieve economic stability. Out of that work, we've really kind of solidified where we want to focus, which again are families that are earning over 150% but under 300% of federal poverty level. And so that's kind of the chart you're looking at right there. When we started, we were serving folks that were generally under 200% of the federal poverty level. We were having a lot of challenges moving the needle on them being able to increase their income, increase their credit, get into home ownership. So we increased the percentage in terms of the bottom at that 150 and went to 300, and we're having a much better result with families that are earning just a little bit more but need a lot of those wraparound supports. And so that's what a Prosper client is. But you see we have something called pre-Prosper, and the way that we're working with our partners now is to make it a continuum. So you're in Ridge's program and you're pre-Prosper, so maybe you're working in a local nursing home and you're providing care services there for 12 or 13 or 15 an hour. You might go to Ridges and get a CNA, and now you're able to make 18 an hour, but you're still maybe in social safety net. You haven't actually gotten to Prosper or ALICE, and so then you can come back and get further credentialing through some of the partnerships that we have or some of the opportunities that we're offering, and you can get yourself up to that 50 or 60. So the idea is that we're trying to all work together to help that person on the continuum to financial stability. That's just one example, but we get referrals from pretty much all of the partners that I just mentioned, and we refer out too where appropriate to our partners as well. Next slide. So Prosper launched this year, February 2025. The goal here is to give individuals up to $2,500 apiece. It's anything for career development, job improvement, certifications, entrepreneurship. Individuals have to work at least 30 hours a week. Our goal is to try to get 20 folks supported this year, so it's still a newer program. And next year we're hoping to serve 20 clients again. So it's really about scalability and funding. Right now we raised private philanthropy to cover the cost of this program, and then the city was gracious in giving us resources this year to go toward this program. But as I said, if you want to go to the next slide, this is something that we definitely want to scale next year and in years to come. This is a client that we just supported. So Tamara, single parent, one child. working at UVA Health as an anesthesia technician. She came just because she felt like she couldn't advance in her career, and we approved a stipend to get her emergency medical technician certification and buy her uniforms. So this is really basic stuff for $2,500, but it's like really essential when you're living on that $58,000 we just talked about a moment ago, or $50,000. And so you can go to the next slide. It's just another client example. Rashid came, single father of 2 sons, non-emergency medical transport businesses he got off the ground, Carrying Connections LLC, serving seniors and Medicaid clients, and we just helped him buy a laptop. He didn't have a computer of any kind, and helped him get some design up so he could promote his company. So again, right around $2,500. And he's a past CIC participant. So he did go through CIC's program for entrepreneurism, but then like a lot of CIC graduates, if they don't get a loan, because sometimes it's tough to get a loan if you're a small business and you're just starting off, then there's these sort of needs that you have, and so grants can really be helpful in getting people to bridge the gap there. So next slide. So the proposal that we are putting before you today, this year we had $31,500 in support from the city, and then $46,000 was being invested in the program by United Way. For next year, we're hoping to get $50,000 from the city of Charlottesville to fund another 20 Charlottesville residents in this program. And then also, we make referrals to the Downtown Job Center. One of the things we've been working with Ashley on is how to make sure we're referring back and forth effectively as possible, making sure that Ella Jordan, who's our senior director on the team, has the right contacts and knows who to work with at the city, and direct contact with the city of Charlottesville for additional referrals as well, and to some of our additional programs that we operate. So in addition to the program I just mentioned to you, we have our LIFT program, so we do about $12,000 a year where we give a family a code and they're able to get to work or to childcare, however many codes they need a week, as long as we have those resources available. If you're able to have a car but it's old and having challenges, which a lot of our clients face, we have a vehicle repair program we just launched. We invest about $50,000 a year. We've signed an agreement with Network to Work. We're going to be servicing their clients, and we have 4 or 5 local mechanics that we now work with that are certified, that we have a relationship with, and we're making those repairs up to $2,500. So they're grants, they don't have to be repaid, but they're keeping people on the road. And then ultimately, if somebody wants to be able to be in a transportation, wants a newer vehicle, we have the Driving Lives Forward program. We partner with a local dealership, Carter Myers. We invest up to $16,000 per family. We help them with down payment assistance. Insurance right now is extraordinarily expensive. It's about $400 a month on average for families to get insurance. So we help them with that. The down payment brings their payment down, and they're able to make a payment of about $300 and build their credit and be in a newer vehicle. So the idea is to scaffold the transportation continuum. A lot of folks, encourage bicycling and things in the city, which of course makes sense, but when you have young children and families, it's sometimes tough. Also, public transportation can be an option, but buses don't always run when a lot of our folks work. A lot of our folks are doing 2 shifts, so they work night shifts or they work weekend shifts, and they can't always necessarily access public transportation, and also with young children, car seats, things of that nature. So that can be challenging. So we're just trying to provide a full continuum of support to our local families as far as that goes. We do have a family investment program, so families that are looking to purchase their home through Habitat get referred to us. We invest $10,000 over 2 years and help them get in a position to be able to afford their first home. So there are other wraparound programs that we have that support Prosper. So Prosper is nestled in these other programs, and we're really trying to have a program that meets every family's need that comes to United Way, as long as we have the funding to support them. So that's it. That's what I wanted to share with you guys today.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for that. Questions? Anyone have questions for Ravi?
Well, I'm curious, I know that as a request for funding to the city, this came to us relatively late, and I gather that there are a lot of moving parts and some of them didn't move in all the right directions. What can you fill me in on the history?
So we did make a request, and we made a request of the repeat of 31.5, and it came back at half, around 15,000. And so we did some sort of research to figure out what would be the best solution, and we're encouraged to come back and share our program with you and see if there's any additional funds, if they could be deployed for this program. We put 50 because ultimately we want to serve 20 families, and if we don't have that funding, we're out trying to raise those private dollars, but nothing's guaranteed. So 50 would allow us to serve those 20 families, but anything, 15,000 isn't going to get us very far. So we're back asking to at least have funding restored and potentially a little more if this program makes sense for the city.
Restored to what level?
31,500, I believe, was the exact amount that we were given last year.
Restored to the amount of your request.
Correct.
And what you received the year before, right?
Current
Yeah,
year,
so
yes.
this was the first year we got money for Prosper.
Okay.
Yep. And then we applied again in the fall, and just, I guess it was a month or two back, got word that funding had been cut to half. And it wasn't specific to our program. My understanding it was all programs are experiencing cutbacks.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions?
Yes, so you touched on it briefly at the end about how there's people who are advocating for bike usage, guilty. And then you mentioned that in the context of the vehicle assistance program. If someone did prefer a bike, would the vehicle assistance program help them with that, or is it strictly limited to cars?
No, I would love to have an opportunity to work more. So we have I mean, everybody that comes to us has a family. So far, there's been a need, for vehicles because of that, or public transportation. But if we had a single person come to us, certainly we are willing to work with anything that we can get to get people to work.
But like if a family wanted a cargo bike that can fit 2 kids on the back, would that be something you would help them purchase?
Yeah, absolutely. We would never turn down anybody looking for a transport option. So far, we haven't had a request for that particular transportation option, mostly because it's a year-round thing, and it's winter, and it's cold, and it's raining, and it's this, and it's that, and you've got kids and groceries and all the things we hear that families go through. But certainly, we wouldn't turn that opportunity down. That was what a family asked for, and there was an opportunity for funding or, yeah.
And you don't have any established relationships with any of the local bike shops?
Not right now, no.
Okay, thanks.
But we'd definitely be willing to look into it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
And then, so where would this money come from?
Yeah, so I was going to walk you back through the process. So United Way applied through the Vibrant Community Fund. The request that was submitted was $31,500. That's the amount that they are currently operating under this fiscal year that they were awarded last year. The results from the recommendations came back at $14,805, which is the amount that they've been notified that they'll receive beginning July 1.
For FY26.
For FY26. When I shared with you all the list of all the money I had cobbled together to give you the big pot to play with, that would be where you would be pulling from. So that would mean any additional funding at this point would come out of your council's Strategic Initiatives Fund, which today is sitting at roughly $364,000 based on the allocations that you approved through that budget work session when we went through a series of considerations.
Okay. Michael, any questions?
No, I don't have any questions.
Yeah.
I would just close by saying I know it's tough. Your job is tough. I know we make grants and it's tough to decide where the money should go. But again, we're passionate about the program because we see it as crucial to local families being able to move forward, and just the families we're supporting already. It's just made an incredible difference, and it's relatively a small amount of money. So yeah. So anyway, let me know if you need additional information. We're happy to email you, Sam, and you can pass it along.
Okay.
Yeah.
We would do a check-in in the next, our next check-in to see where you are. There's no vote tonight, of course,
Right.
because there's no action item, but I'll find out from you all just kind of where you land on if you want an action item to come forward or not.
And just to clarify, it would be the 50,000 number. Is that what we would be
That will be up for
funding
consideration as
to?
well. That's your call, because as it's coming out of your council strategic initiatives fund, that's where all the flexibility is. This is no longer about Vibrant Community, because that fund is already spoken, that process is concluded. This would be you adding atop that.
Supplementing the Vibrant
Yes.
Community Fund, either up to 31.5 or up to 50.
Correct.
Or
And
anywhere in between.
what we would say to you is that you would be looking at this as a part of your economic prosperity strategic outcome area. If you were looking to demonstrate something further, then this would be an example of what we would support.
Thanks.
Yeah. That's what was I going to say on that. I guess that's really, that's a good way to summarize it. That makes sense. The grants also go directly to clients, so we're not taking an admin fee right now out of this program. I'm privately raising funds to cover staff time, overhead, operations, all of that, because it's like anything that you're starting off with. We want to just try to get it off the ground and really show success. So it's just direct grants to families.
Great. Hey, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Really great to see you.
Appreciate it. It was good to see
Yeah,
everybody.
thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, next up is the water supply plan update. Mr. Sanders, you're going to,
Actually, Ruth Emmerich with TJPDC is going to present because I want her to.
My apologies to Councilor Payne, who's already heard this presentation once on Thursday. I am here to cover the regional water supply planning update with you all. Some of you are already familiar. Back in October, there were some changes that became effective with Virginia State Code relating to regional water supply planning. You can advance the slides. One of the big changes is no longer just local water supply planning, it's required to be regional. And there are these new regional planning areas that have been defined based on river basins. We are currently in the Middle James 1 Regional Planning Unit. That's Charlottesville, Albemarle, Greene, Fluvanna, Louisa, and Buckingham counties. Nelson County is in a different planning unit. At the kickoff meeting in March, the TJPDC was requested to coordinate the planning effort for the Middle James 1 Regional Planning Unit. The next slide has a map of the regional planning units that were defined across the state. There have been some changes in the boundaries that you see here. I know there are a couple of regional planning units that have merged into a single planning unit. And next slide, please. This just shows that there are a couple of new sections to the local and regional water supply planning code. And the next slide. So the main components of this regional water supply plan are really to take the existing data that our localities and water authorities have already compiled and put it into a single plan so that all the data is together by watershed, by river basin, and help us plan regionally to make sure that if there are risks to our water supply, if there are opportunities where we could be working together where we're not already, that we document that and are able to move forward. And the next slide, please. So you're probably wondering how this is going to be funded. The General Assembly allocated some funds to support this effort over the next 2 years. Well, really this current fiscal year and next fiscal year. TJPDC applied and was awarded about $8,000 to help with the administrative cost of this. As you know, that's not a lot of money. VAPDC, the Virginia Association of Planning District Commissions, will be advocating at the General Assembly for additional funding. Right now, we're still waiting on additional guidance from DEQ on what all is required to be in the plan. We know that a lot of the data we already have is sufficient, but we also know that that may not be all that's required. So there's a possibility that at some point what is required will be beyond the technical expertise or capacity of our local staff to complete this plan. But the good news is the plan is not required to be submitted to DEQ until October of 2029. So we have a little bit of time to figure this out. I mentioned that there was a kickoff meeting held for our regional water supply planning unit held with DEQ in March. That was a well-attended meeting from each of the jurisdictions participating in our RPU and DEQ staff. Last week, the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission voted on a resolution to affirm participation for the PDC member localities that are in that RPU, so you guys don't need to consider a separate resolution. Buckingham County, because they're not a part of the PDC Region 10, will have to do their own resolution to
can you say
affirm.
that last paragraph again? Sorry.
No problem. So the regional planning unit that we are in includes all of the normal Region 10 localities, but not Nelson, but it includes Buckingham County, which is not in PDC 10.
Okay.
So the TJPDC Planning District Commission voted last week on a resolution that affirms participation for each of the PDC localities that are in that RPU.
Okay.
So you guys don't need to do a separate resolution
Okay.
to participate.
But Buckingham is going to have to
But they have to because they're not a member of TJPDC.
I see.
They're a member of a different PDC in Virginia.
Thank you.
Yes. And then Nelson County similarly has to do a separate resolution because they're in a different RPU. A little complicated when boundaries don't line up. We are planning to hold a kickoff meeting with the RPU stakeholder group in probably June because the funds have been awarded, but we don't actually have a contract from DEQ yet, and we just want to make sure that any time that we're spending on it is reimbursable from the grant. We know that we'll need to do a project scope and budget and a variety of other things, just figure out who's going to take the lead on which portions. I have with me Jennifer Whitaker from RWSA and my staff member Logan Indy to help answer any questions.
Great. That's the end of the presentation?
That's it.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm on the Ravenna board, and so I've heard a little bit about this. My initial freak out was, oh my goodness, Shawsville and Albemarle have invested a lot of money in our water systems here.
Yes.
Are we going to be carrying all these other folks along with us? And I guess all that's to be determined, and I probably was prejudging things. But yeah, do others have questions? Michael, Natalie?
Not really. I mean, I think obviously the feedback we've gotten the most is specifically around our community water supply plan and the central water line, but that is distinct from this process and doesn't really directly connect, as I've understood it.
Yeah.
So, but in terms of what's actually in front of us tonight, I don't have any questions.
My question is kind of a little based off what you were just saying about how this affects our relationship and burden for our surrounding counties, particularly in light of the Greene County Reservoir situation. How does that play into this?
Yes, so Greene County is a part of the regional planning unit that we're in. There was some discussion about a month ago about whether or not they would remain in this regional planning unit or opt to join the one that's just north of them. So far, there has not been any movement in that direction, so they will be a part of our regional planning unit. But that does mean that there will need to be some considerations of, are there connections? Should there be connections? What's the risk if we do nothing or we do something different? But that is to be determined by all the parties involved.
Okay, and just to clarify, this was something that the General Assembly said, you're now doing this?
Yes.
But, yeah, and I'm with you, Councilor Oshrin. But this, after my initial sort of reaction in the RWSA meetings, I climbed down a little bit because Mr. Moyer told us, I think I've got this right, that there's going to be a lot of haggling that happens. We may plan for our water per these regions that have been laid out, but whether or not we actually have cross connects or we're supplementing the water from Greene County, all of those things are much further down the line, I guess. What the
Correct.
DEQ is asking is sort of like at not a 30,000 foot level, but maybe at a 10,000 foot level, and maybe that's like, well, this part of this RPU has, this water system that works great, and this part not so much, and then the third part that's in the middle. So I guess it's, it sounds like there's just a lot left to be thought through in terms of how much solidarity we're supposed to have with our adjacent counties.
And I would actually, I would agree with that concern. At least as I understood it, this doesn't directly connect to that, but it's something I'm also concerned about in the sense that we know that some of these surrounding counties have made a conscious policy decision to not fund basic water infrastructure. And, we can see in the news regularly lack of water pressure for fire trucks, water facilities breaking down. And that was a policy decision they made. And if there's any situation where we have to end up subsidizing them because of that, I don't think that, I would agree that that would be a huge issue.
Yep. But at this point, it sounds like that worry may be premature.
Yes.
Okay.
Jennifer, you want to say anything?
Urbana Water and Sewer Authority. I'm the Director of Engineering and Maintenance. I think it's fair to say our initial meetings, everyone at the table is concerned about the bigger picture and ultimately where this all will go. The one piece of reassurance that I have taken from this is that previously within the Commonwealth, anyone that had, anyone that had a water system did a regional plan or did a plan, right? So we included the town of Scottsville, Charlottesville, Albemarle County, and then all the well systems within the county. And so we had a plan, but there are large pieces of the Commonwealth that weren't included in any regional plan. And so when you look at it from a statewide perspective, you were consistently seeing underestimation of what the true demand during a drought was for the entire Commonwealth. And so I see this as the first step of the Commonwealth really trying to get its arms around what is the magnitude of the need within the Commonwealth as sort of one step. And then the second step is also getting everyone's plans sort of cataloged, if you will. So I think each municipality already that has a plan has been working on plans, and certainly this council has invested heavily in the community water supply plan for us, and getting that cataloged within our system. So I really do believe that first 5-year plan is going to be about cataloging the work that everyone has done to date. Eventually, that may turn into something else, but in the short run, being 5 years, I fundamentally believe that it's about cataloging and understanding what the need for the whole state is.
So the initial part that's due in 2029 is, this is the status just put together in kind of a nice narrative package, not okay, now we need to work towards this together sort of plan.
There is some overarching language that encourage regionalization, and I think that has impacts on future permits. So as you apply for a permit, is there water within your region? How are you playing nice with your neighbors? Those types of things. But I do believe there is a lot of resistance politically to forcing cross-border agreements. It's more encouraging cross-border agreements.
And what was the drive for the General Assembly to do this? Do you mind speaking in a mic so people at home can hear? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Logan. I'm also with the TJPDC. I'm a regional planner. I think in around 2001, there was an effort to dictate localities make water supply plans on the back of a drought. And I think they realized after that they wanted to, well, it's 20 years later, I don't know how quickly they realized, but that they wanted to do it at a river basin level. And so I think that map that you saw earlier was their best stab at articulating that on a river basin level. So I don't know exactly why it happened now, but I think that, I think with the idea being that it's not just like a regional plan, it was like a literal watershed wide plan. So anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not inherently, I think it is odd to have a cross-jurisdiction, water is something that everybody needs, and it is something that is defined by environmental barriers, not by political barriers, so I kind of understand that in the long term, it will be good to have some kind of regional analysis. But as Michael said, we want to make sure that the partners in that region are investing smartly and at the same level as others, so that there's not, so there's just a little more equality and contribution.
Yeah. Lloyd, anything?
I think you all have touched on the things that I'm most concerned about. I guess the one thing that might be not really within the city of Charlottesville's concern is to get a better sense of what the well capabilities are. For example, in Albemarle County, we keep hearing that the reason why Albemarle can't do various things is because they don't have the water in the right places to enable them to do the things we might like them to do. And so, although I mean, it's not that we're going to be able to tell anybody what they ought to do out there, but at least it would be interesting to know what more of the facts are. So.
Sam?
I guess I'll pick up on what Councilor Snook just said. To me, it seems like this is an opportunity to do exactly that, find out certain things, because we're being mandated to plan on a regional level. Therefore, you have to now be concerned about what our peers around us are experiencing. And while we may be well-suited for decisions that we've made to lead in that conversation, it would be helpful for us to understand who might not and how far behind they may be and where a lift of some kind may actually come to play. So for me, it just seems like it's best about awareness at this point. And it could become a challenge down the road. I would admit that my reaction was the same of, wait, what do you mean? We've been planning for our population of a city and a county that's still growing, and now you're saying we have to concern ourselves with others. Not that we wouldn't, but I think it's important for us to understand what their needs are too.
Yeah, and Ravenna is such a great organization, and you mentioned the piece about leadership. I'm sure that it will be providing that, as well as with the PDC. So thank y'all. Appreciate y'all coming.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Okay, next up we have Mr. Chris Engel is going to talk with us about the Charlottesville Economic Development Authority Annual Report.
Okay, good afternoon, councilors.
Afternoon.
I'm joined tonight by Matt Johnson. He's also with our office, so I just wanted to mention that before we kick off here. So at your last meeting, and thank you, Remy. I guess you're going to advance slides on our behalf. Thank you. At your last meeting, you had some discussion about affordable housing and a tax abatement program that could be coming for your consideration soon to help incentivize affordable housing. The EDA was mentioned in that context as a tool for accomplishing that, which triggered a few questions. So City Manager asked me to visit with you all tonight. There was an opening in the earlier session, so I'm going to do that, give you a little bit of history about CEDA, which is the Charlottesville Economic Development Authority, a little bit of overview of EDAs in the state, quickly, and then a little bit of some of the major projects that the EDA has been involved with over the years, and then a quick peek at some current activities that we are working on at the moment. In years past, the council orientation would have included a little bit about the EDA. That has gone by the wayside a bit, so it occurred to me that the current cohort of counselors has little to no formal knowledge about the EDA unless you seek it out on your own or ask questions or come to a meeting, which you likely haven't done. So in any case, we apologize for that, and we'll try and catch you up tonight on some of that activity. So go ahead, next slide, please. So in Virginia, EDAs and IDAs are synonymous with one another. Industrial Development Authority, Economic Development Authority, they mean essentially the same thing. They're born out of the state code, which you see on the right-hand part of this slide. In the early 70s is about the time that the enabling legislation occurred, and essentially a little snapshot of a fairly long piece of state code is up here related to the public purpose is to promote industry, develop trade, industrial, government, nonprofit, commercial enterprises, as well as institutes of higher learning. And ag are all referenced there. That language feels a little dated, and that's because it was part of the original 1970s information that established the Industrial Development and Revenue Bond Act, which is what EDAs currently still operate under. So next slide. So EDAs in Virginia have specific powers granted to them, and these are some of them. These are the most significant ones. So make grants to private businesses, sell, lease properties on behalf of a city typically, issue bonds for the benefit of private entities. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Make loans to private entities and or forgive loans as well. As we go through the little bit of a history on Charlottesville's EDA, all of these have been done at one time or another. So we'll dive in a little bit more on each of those. Next slide, please. So the private bond financing piece is essentially a carve-out to allow tax exemption to occur for qualifying facilities. So manufacturing facilities and charitable facilities, so 501c3 organizations, 501c6 organizations can qualify for that. In this particular scenario, bonds are simply a loan. So we are a conduit issuer in this case, and this gets a little technical, but the money is not the city's money, the money is not the EDA's money. It's an entity would come to the EDA and say, we would like to have a tax-exempt bond issued. EDAs are authorized to issue those bonds, but once again, we're not liable for the payment. We're just simply conferring tax-exempt status on that bond. And that allows their financing to occur, in some cases, depending upon where the market is, to occur in a more advantageous position for them. So we get those requests from time to time. I will show you a list of items, issuances that have occurred over time related to that. So that's a technical piece. There's a whole specialization in the legal world in Virginia, and there's about 10 attorneys that do municipal finance, and they do industrial revenue bonds. Our authority has on call one of those individuals whenever we have these items. We rely on them heavily. It's a very specialized piece of Virginia code and of the IRS code. Next slide, please. So CEDA. CEDA started its life as CIDA, as an industrial development authority. It changed its name in 2007. The powers are not any different. But we felt it was a little bit more reflective of the activity that was currently happening in Charlottesville, which is more economic development and not industrial, as you might imagine. A small city of 10 square miles with no industrial park, to my knowledge, ever. We've got a few little pieces of things like that, but in any case, industrial didn't really fit quite as well. So we changed the name, but it did start as an industrial development authority. I referenced the conduit financing. So over the years from 1976 to current, 64 projects fall into that category, and the total about $342 million in total value. About half of that is attributed to one major project. Many of the projects are much, much smaller. I'll show you a little bit of those as we move along here. So next slide, please. This is the mission and guiding principles. We did this about 10 or 12 years ago. We sat down with the authority and just kind of developed a little more easier to understand and share version of what we do. So we didn't constantly have to refer to section 15.2, 4900 of the state code, which is kind of hard to read, and nobody really wants to go there when you ask about what the EDA or IDA can do. So we created this mission, guiding principles that we refer to regularly as we undertake activities. So the bubbles kind of pull out the highlights there. So it's about increasing the tax base, creating employment opportunities for citizens within our geographic boundary of the city. And it's about enhancing the economic base. So that's traded sector, that's businesses that actually create a product or service that is then sold outside of the area, brings new revenue to the community. It's the lifeblood of how communities operate. So we want to try and encourage that activity, create job opportunities, attract overall investment, enhance the tax base. Those are the key elements of what you see there. And some of you are studying this slide and wondering why there's a cute little motorcycle and sidecar on there. And that is essentially, as a reminder, sometimes I describe the city and the EDA as the motorcycle and the sidecar, with the city being the motorcycle that determines the direction and steers the ship, the sidecar being the EDA that rides alongside and helps out as needed on the things that it's enabled to do through the state code. And we'll share a couple of those as we move along here. So if you hear me refer to sidecar and motorcycle, that's simply what I'm referring to there in terms of how we go about our mission with the EDA. Next slide, please. And speaking of EDA board members, I'd like to welcome Addison Barnhart, who just joined us. Glad you could be here. These are the 7 members of the EDA board currently. Addison's our current chair for the year, and you see the other members there. 7 members, that's defined in the state code. They're set up for 4-year terms, and they can have 2 4-year terms, and then they're kind of timed out, if you will. So these are the current members. We meet on the second Tuesday of every month at 4 p.m. in City Space currently. And yeah, next slide. So we do have an annual audit that happens. We're currently using Robinson Farmer Cox. That's the city's auditor. They spend time reviewing our activities as part of their visit to the city, but it is an independent audit. It happens annually. We've been doing that for years. We also issue a separate annual report that you see noted here, and that just kind of captures the highlights of the most recent year and puts it into a narrative format so that people that have interest in it could take a look at that. This is separate from the Office of Economic Development's annual report. There is overlap, and we'll kind of cover some of that as we move forward, but we do produce an annual report, and we do have an annual audit. Next slide, please. So I referred to the industrial revenue bonds earlier. Here's a list of some of these names you'll certainly recognize. Under the current category, we've got 4 outstanding right now, and you can see the amounts over to the side there. And then the retired bonds are ones that have been fulfilled, and they are just as examples of bonds that have been issued in the past. You'll notice that all of these likely fall, I think all of these fall into the charitable category that I mentioned. There's 2 major categories that can qualify you. If you're manufacturing a product, you can qualify. If you're a charitable organization, you can qualify. So when it makes sense for a charitable organization in the process of building a building or something of that nature, working with their financial advisor, their bank, they will determine whether they would like to seek this out, and they will engage the EDA as necessary from that point. The process, which takes 2 to 3 visits to the EDA, also eventually comes to the City Council for a vote as well. It's probably been a year or 2 since you've had any of these come before you. Once again, there's no liability for the city or the EDA, no obligation. It's simply the conduit financing occurring. Next slide, please. So here's an example that you may recognize. This is the Live Arts building on the downtown mall. Their formal name is City Center for Contemporary Arts. They sought a tax-exempt bond issuance to build this building some probably 20 years ago, maybe a little bit more at this point. So they qualified as a charitable organization. It made sense to them. They came, went through the process, and had an IRB issued on their behalf, and they have fulfilled that at this point. That's an example that people can visualize as a mall area organization. So next slide, please. So other things that EDAs can do is real estate acquisition and management on behalf of a city, and this is probably the largest example of that the EDA has been involved with. This one goes back some number of years, but it's kind of nice to show because it shows a fully completed project in that this was about 20 acres of land that was surplus to the railroad after they changed kind of how they did operations and no longer needed as much kind of space alongside the railroad. The city and the EDA as an entity, recognized that land is scarce in our 10 square miles, and that we ought to maybe put this to as best use as possible. So the EDA actually bought the land from the railroad and did some remediation over some time, and got all of it ready to sell over a period of time. This took about 15 years, and it was sold off into a variety of uses, including some of the first downtown housing in the Belmont Lofts, kind of newer downtown housing in the Belmont Lofts that you see there on the bottom right. The old LexisNexis building was a centerpiece of the east end of the mall for a period of time. The C&O Row townhomes are probably the most recent and last piece to be sold off, but over time, you can see that a number of jobs were created in that space, new residential units, tax base was added to the city's real estate rolls. So that's a good example of a project that has come to fruition over a period of years. Next slide, please. Another example is what we used to call the S&L building, now the S&P Global building. Many of you probably know the history of this building on some level. It used to be occupied by the federal government and the National Ground Intelligence Center, and they decided to move to the campus in Albemarle County, which gave the city significant concern, given that that was a major employer downtown that was going to leave and potentially leave a building vacant for a long period of time. So working with state and federal folks at the time, a little over 20 years ago, the city was able to come into ownership of this building. They leased it to the EDA. The EDA worked with, then at the time, S&L Financial, to put together a loan package and a long-term lease that allowed them to have control of the building and bring it up to standards into a really nice office building for downtown standards. And this continues to this day. A number of jobs have been created, taxes paid over time, as you see there. Yes, ma'am.
Are you saying the city owns this building and does a long-term lease?
That's correct.
So then how is it on our tax rolls?
They pay a leasehold interest. For a long-term lease, they pay a portion of the actual taxes owed, and that was part of the original deal.
So we don't get full real estate tax benefit, but we get
Correct.
some of that made up. What is the portion?
It's a percentage. I don't know the exact number, but it's a percentage based upon the length of the lease. So the longer the lease, it's more like ownership, so the more you pay. And then as the lease gets shorter, you pay proportionally less, but there's a minimum in the agreement, I believe, that requires them to pay a certain amount. I don't remember exactly what that is.
Yeah, is it like 5% or like 75%?
Oh, no, it's much more than that.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's on the higher end.
But the city does own it, leases it to the EDA. The EDA then leases it to the entity and manages that interaction. And it's a 30-year lease.
Okay, thank you.
How much rent are they paying?
They pay a minimum rent that is well below market value.
I remember looking at it a couple of years ago and being really amazed at how low it was. I'm wondering, is this as a result of a deal that got struck 30 years ago or 20 years ago that we just regret having made now, or?
I don't know that it's a regret, but it was a deal that was struck. So the city put $0 into this, and it's probably about a $30 million asset. So they have done the first renovation and the second renovation, and they do all the maintenance on it. So from that perspective, their rent is low, but their operating obligations are significant. In many cases, some of those would be put to a landlord. In this case, everything is on their side. At the end of the deal, we will come out with a building that is much improved.
So I'm curious, how did the city end up with it for $0?
Well, I wasn't here at the time, but as I understand it, there was some meetings and some conversations, and there's a document in the book.
Like what just happened with FEI, or is it?
It's similar, at a different time, but similar.
I mean, on the one hand, I remember looking at the rent and thinking, gee, that's a pittance compared to the value. But if we're looking at it as sort of a return on our investment, if our investment is negligible, then all of a sudden it looks like a much better deal.
Correct.
So when do things end so that there would be some asset that would be the city's asset?
The 30-year lease, I believe, ends in 2033, so it's in sight.
Okay.
Yep.
And at that point, is there any constraint on the city about what we can do with the property?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
There was earlier on, but not now, not at the end. Yeah. So, opportunity for sure. So just another example. Next slide, please. Public-private partnerships. This one's right out the back door, the Charlottesville Pavilion. It's a similar scenario whereby the city owns the land and always has. Saw an opportunity to work with a private developer to create a music venue or attraction, And so about 20-plus years ago now as well, this was put into place, and it's been operating. It's a similar scenario where the city leases it to the EDA. The EDA leases it to the entity that operates the facility, and that's also for a similar length of time. That one's a 35-year term. But the reason the city was engaged in it and wanted to do it is to bring people downtown, to create an anchor for the east end of the downtown mall. At that time, there was not a transit center, and there was not really a focal point at this end. So that part of certainly played into the reasoning for why the city wanted to be engaged in something like that. But the EDA is a tool for facilitating such activity when and if the city wants to do so. Next slide. Another good example is the Jefferson School. Everyone's aware of this. That was neglected for many, many years, and then a nonprofit was formed that put together a package that included a significant contribution from the city, and the EDA facilitated that loan through to the nonprofit, and historic tax credits and a traditional bank financing created the other two pieces of this deal to make this come back to life. It's a complicated project, but it's an example of where the EDA was used kind of as the conduit for passing through the city dollars to help reinvest in this important building. Next slide, please. This is a slightly different example, also involves real estate. We term these reimbursement agreements, and it's exactly what it sounds like. We paid the developer we reimbursed the developer of the Whole Foods site to create the stub of the road that was needed. Hillsdale Drive, as folks might remember, was long thought of as a plan in the state's mind to help with congestion around here, but they weren't ready to fund it back in 2009. The Whole Foods was ready to move and wanted a bigger store, and the city desperately was desirous of having this type of store a little closer by, and the sales meals tax that comes from such a store was very attractive. So we created an agreement that said, you build the road, we accept it, we'll pay you what your cost was for the road, and but for the road, the Whole Foods wouldn't be there. So it's one of these things where we had to kind of move pretty quickly to help something like this happen. So call it a reimbursement agreement, helped create some jobs, and brought an anchor retail institution to the city back in 2009.
So when we put money into it, where did that money come from? General tax revenues?
Yes. So in almost all these cases, the city is the funding source for the EDA, and would have provided, it probably would have been an economic development strategic money at that time, and this road cost about $2 million. So it would have been an investment from either contingency or economic development strategic investment or some other source to invest in this road. And then down the road, we didn't have to invest in that quarter mile, not quite quarter mile, but we didn't have to invest in that piece. So as it turns out, the state ended up doing that many years later. So in some ways benefited from us doing this piece first, but we also got the benefit of having the Whole Foods for about 10 years prior. Mm-hmm. So. Next slide.
And not losing it to somewhere else.
Correct.
Like, out of our jurisdiction.
Correct. Yeah, next slide. Another example of a reimbursement agreement, also kind of out the back door, is Water Street Extended. This also connects to that first project that I shared about the railroad property that was no longer needed. So Water Street Extended was a piece of that railroad property. Water Street ended just past the LexisNexis building on Water Street, where you would turn at, I guess, 10th Street there. It dead-ended. Maybe it's been a decade, maybe 12 years, something like that. And the coal tower was back there, but it was kind of a Jeep road, if you will, and no man's land. So there was no connection. So the developer of the City Walk property was interested in building these apartments, and the road needed to be put in addition at the same time. So it made sense. The city was desirous of having 300 new apartment units fairly close to downtown. So the contractor that was on site to do site work for this property was engaged to do the the streetscape, so the sidewalk, the street trees, the road, the utilities under the road, and the fence that protects the public from the railroad were all part of a reimbursement agreement, similarly situated to the Whole Foods arrangement to allow this to happen in a timely manner to this development. So just another example of a reimbursement agreement. Next slide. So moving on to some slightly different programs. APHID is a state program. It stands for Agricultural Forest Industry Development, and is a matching fund that the state puts out a couple of times a year, and it requires a local match. The EDA was the applicant in this particular case. Three Notch is a local brewery that started and grew out of Charlottesville. It's now throughout the whole state. When they expanded from their original location to the current location that they're in, they committed to using Virginia products in their brewing process, which triggers the agricultural piece of this grant. So we were an applicant on their behalf, and they did receive some matching funds from the state and helped their new facility kind of come off the ground. So an example of a state matching fund role that we have played. Next slide, please. Another example of that same fund, a little more recent, the Beacon Kitchen opened in April of this year. They also, because they are a commercial kitchen that is processing Virginia-based product and helping Virginia-based producers qualified for the APHID match as well. So we were the entity that applied for and received those fundings, and we managed that over a period of about 2 years. Those have a 2-year window on them. That equipment that you see in that picture has been purchased and installed, and if you've been for the tour, a good portion of that was APHID grant funded. Not all of it, but some of it. Next slide, please. Performance agreements, another thing that the city and EDAs do. When you hear the governor make an announcement about a big thing happening somewhere, there's almost always an EDA involved. The state makes the announcement and funnels some funds to an EDA that usually has an agreement, a legal agreement with the entity that's actually building a building or industrial park or something of that nature. In this case, this particular project, which is known as Waterhouse, did not involve the state. It just involved the city. World Strides was seeking a home downtown. The urban environment to develop in a particularly tight site was challenging, and they sought out a little support from the city. So we created a performance agreement that works in such a way that once the project is in place, we take a portion of the tax increment created by the project and share that back with the development for a period of years. In this case, it was 5 years. This project has come and gone, and World Strides is in a different place and different time than they were back in 2010, as the world has changed significantly with regard to student travel. But nonetheless, the building is here, and its value has only gone up, as all buildings have in the city. So while the project might have changed and the jobs are not the World Stride jobs in this space, the building and the valuation is still there. So an example of a performance agreement whereby the EDA managed this process on behalf of the city. Next slide, please. Another example, a little bit bigger project, also nearby the Martha Jefferson Hospital. Everybody was concerned when that closed that there would be potentially a vacant property for many years that wasn't developed. So we acted quickly to engage some tenants and worked with the state as well on this one to create a performance agreement that worked for 10 years, and this one is now complete. So we shared a portion of the real estate tax created by the project, and in this case, the project wasn't a new project, it was a renovation, so the minor changes to the outside, but basically the same footprint stayed in place. So just another example, a little bit bigger one. Both of those are now completed, so we managed those over the life of those performance agreements. Next slide. So some current performance agreements, these will be a little bit more familiar to you. Kindlewood Phase 1 has been built and is in repayment starting this year at some point. So the way these work, you make the investment and then 12 months have to transpire, so you have to pay the taxes. And then we validate the fact that it's been built and that the units are doing what they said they would do with regard to AMI. And then that's when the grant repayment starts. So Kindlewood is about there. Kindlewood Phase 2 is under construction, so that's got a little bit to go. But you all have approved both of those, as well as the 501 Cherry, which is still in very early pre-development, but a piece of that financing and funding that will help them get there is the knowledge that there will be a portion of the tax increment shared with the project for a period of time. So those are kind of to come, performance agreements and other examples as well. Next slide, please. So a couple of programs. The EDA does support a few programs. Some of these will be familiar to you. The Go Startup program, Go Hire program, CVille Match program are three that are out there. Go Hire is another one. I mentioned Go Hire. CVille, Ale Trail, and Made in Charlottesville are now kind of moved off from our radar, but we did help get those started. And the EDA supports these efforts on an ongoing basis as part of kind of being going back to the motorcycle and sidecar, helping support the Economic Development Strategic Plan that our office is managing by riding alongside and supporting these that are programs that benefit city businesses and employees in some cases. Next slide. So just a slide about COVID. Not as relevant at the moment, but during that time, the EDA took significant action really pretty quickly to help support some existing funds that were established and create a couple of new ones to help facilitate relief to businesses at the time. The Business Equity Fund was actually started by council in 2018, but when COVID happened, the EDA added to the Business Equity Fund, which is managed by CIC, Charlottesville Community Investment Collaborative. They are in the business of doing loans, so they manage it on our behalf. But additional funds were added to the Business Equity Fund at the moment of COVID, as well as the establishment of a Business Recovery Fund, which was also managed by Community Investment Collaborative. So just an example of kind of moving quickly, using some reserve dollars to help in an emergency situation during the COVID moments. Next slide. And we're almost wrapped up here. So this is just a graphic that it attempts to show how we help across the spectrum of startup, growth to mature, and then declining businesses. We don't focus so much on the declining piece, but we have programs that help across the spectrum there. So Go Startup is a very early, you've just got an idea and you're not even sure how to get a business license. Keith Grooms in our office helps run that program, and it's 4 weeks where folks get their grounding and they get some help. Eventually, they may need a loan. The Business Equity Fund can come along. If they're a food company, they might end up in the Beacon Kitchen. So we've had significant help, as I mentioned, through the AFID process. The city has also come alongside with a significant investment in Beacon. Earlier, you heard a presentation from the United Way, and they mentioned their Envision, which is kind of their overall kind of program. One of the grant pieces that was mentioned shows up on this screen as a slightly more mature company, potentially applying for and receiving some grant funds through that program. I mentioned the industrial revenue bonds. That's a more mature entity, organization, C3 or C6, or a manufacturing type company. I also mentioned the performance agreements. That's typically a little bit more mature of a developer or company that would be engaged in that piece. So that just gives you a flavor for how we kind of spread across the spectrum of business growth, if you will. So that's kind of the history of EDA a little bit, and some of the programs and projects that we've been involved in. Currently, we are applying for a second Beacon AFID grant. That application just went in. We're hopeful that that will be useful in helping get co-packing equipment, which is a piece that they had to leave out of the first round of their equipment ask. So that is in. We're working on the second year of the Envision grants, which should be released here pretty soon. So continuing that partnership with United Way. We're also involved in some regional activities around the 29 corridor. There's a strategic roadmap study that's being done around national security and bio and life sciences, and how that can connect through up to Ravenna Station and down to the university. So the EDA is helping with that, along with our regional partners. And then one other thing we're working on currently, and details are early, but we're looking at, in the process of working with PHA over some time through the series of performance agreements, we were made aware that they have challenges from time to time quickly accessing funds for purchasing a property or a multifamily unit, not major new construction, but existing properties that they would like to keep in the affordable space. So we're looking at a short-term working capital fund that would be helpful in those cases where an organization needs access to some funding in the short term, like a year, maybe up to 2 years. We're working through that. So they expressed a need and a desire for that, and the EDA is trying to come to the table with an opportunity that might work for that space. Details are to be worked out. It'll be smaller amounts and shorter timeframes, but kind of lower interest rates to make the affordability piece a little bit more easier for them to get in place. So just an example of a few things that we're working on, and I think that's the last slide. Probably next. Yes. Thank you for your time. Happy to answer other thoughts or questions.
Yeah, thank you.
You might
Any
have.
questions?
I've got one. So just right at the end, you mentioned you're not really involved in the decline, which makes sense. You know, you've done the setup process, you know, people have been given the resources that they need to succeed, and people, you know, stop their business for all sorts of different reasons. But do you track the declines and try and see if there's any patterns?
Not in a formal way, but I think informally, in terms of just looking for patterns, we're aware, and we see, and we ask questions. But as you might imagine, people in that situation are, you know, maybe less forthcoming than they might be when they're having a grand opening and they're looking for attention. And we understand that and respect that. So we don't do it in a formal way. We do have a business survey that we have actually running now that kind of seeks regular information on how businesses are doing across that spectrum. Anybody can answer it, regardless of where they fit on the timeline. But specifically to your question, do we focus on the declining businesses and why? Not in a formal way.
Okay, thank you.
Well, and thank you for this presentation. I thought this was a lot of good context and good place to begin a conversation among council in terms of how you outlined how broad the powers of EDAs are and how creatively they can be used, including in Charlottesville history. A few questions and thoughts. One of them, it was striking with the maybe more traditional deals of bringing in a large employer or trying to convince a large employer to stay in Charlottesville, that in all those examples, those employers have either completely left or significantly downsized their presence in those buildings. Is there any tracking of how many of the promised jobs stayed in Charlottesville, or a measurement of how much economic activity actually resulted long-term, and whether that passed a cost-benefit analysis in terms of what the city gave up at the start, or is what the city, you know, gives up in order to facilitate that development so low that if it only lasts 10 years and the employer's presence is largely gone, is it still worth it?
Yeah, I can tell you with respect to the two big private companies involved with the World Strides deal, the Waterhouse project, they committed to 200 jobs. They got up to close to 400 at their peak and then went down from there. They are still a going concern in the city of Charlottesville. They're not in that space, and their footprint is significantly different. It's kind of part of that cycle, unfortunately, and economic development process and strategy has changed significantly over that time. And I think today, if we were to do a similar deal, we would have a little bit different characteristics around it and requirements. So it's hard to track jobs anymore. Jobs are where people live in a lot of cases. There's a lot of remote work. So it's a little trickier because that's typically one of the metrics that economic development, the state is always touting, number of new jobs.
Yeah.
Communities do that as well. So it's trickier to track that in this day and age. So we are aware that they've gone up and down at the Martha Jefferson Hospital site as well. The primary tenant there, CFA, was the driver behind that. They have downsized as well. Now, the good news is that most of that space has been backfilled by other smaller companies. So in terms of one bigger employee or 5 smaller ones, if the number of jobs are similar, I don't know that it matters that much to us. Diversity is typically a good thing across the various types of jobs and companies in the city. So I would offer that as well.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, I think at the state level, they track the success of economic development programs by the amount of jobs in the press release that it said was created. So I've always wondered, how do you really measure what impact these things have?
Well, that is a fair point. And to the point of our performance agreements, they are performance-based. So you must perform and then you get. So we would check employment numbers versus the commitment annually. And if they got it, then they got the incentive. In both of these cases, the real estate is the real estate and it stays, and so that valuation is still there. The employee number, harder to track and something that we're currently wrestling with. If we were to do one of these again, we would do it a little differently for sure.
And I thought one of the striking things as well is, a lot of things we take for granted as defining features of Charlottesville, not just in terms of buildings, but as public spaces, the Pavilion, Live Arts Center, were facilitated by the Economic Development Authority. I know a lot of localities have used it that way in order for partnership with nonprofits, development of community spaces, community resources. The current partnerships in that world are just the Jefferson Scholarship and St. Anne's Belfield School is the largest partners, and it sounded like it had been 15 to 20 years since the city had done use of the EDA for things that relate to acquisition of land or partnership with a nonprofit to build a community space, or even in some of the examples you outlined, bringing in a grocery store to the city or development of a larger housing apartment complex. It's been 15, 20 years since the city's done that, and our current list, again, is just Jefferson Scholarship and STAB. Why has that type of use gone away for so long? When the Economic Development Authority does that, is it really relying on the council saying, we want this to happen, and then we're going to partner with the EDA as a tool, and it hasn't happened because the council has not set that out as a priority? Or is it a lack of nonprofits or businesses coming to the EDA and looking for a partnership?
That's a good question. With respect to the industrial revenue bond piece, that's more a reflection of the market and where organizations are with, are they going to build something and does it make financial sense to them? And that's a little outside of our ability to influence in any significant way. With respect to the other part of your question, the EDA is a tool. It's been around since 1976 here in Charlottesville, and we stand ready to work with the city on projects that make sense. And have there been some discussions in the last few years, of significance to the Pavilion? Probably not quite as many, but the one that comes to mind that was kind of came on the radar and then went off was Market Plaza on Water Street, city-owned property. EDA was heavily involved in that deal to the point that it ceased to become a deal. There was utility work that happened with that. Didn't make the slides because it's kind of underground and not seen, but we helped facilitate the utility work that happened to lead up to that project that still has value to that project and the city. So that was a case where we were about to be involved, and that project has gone to sleep for a bit. We'll hopefully come back at some point in some form or fashion, but we stand ready to help as needed.
Yeah, I would just say I think there's huge opportunities for the council and city government to be as ambitious as it was when the downtown mall was created, or the pavilion was created, or Live Arts was created. We take those things for granted, but there were specific decisions that had to be made and plans. And I think there's opportunities at the Water Street surface parking lot. I think there's opportunities on West Main, on Preston Avenue, to be really ambitious in terms of what our goals are, and the EDA is there as a huge tool to help us do that, which I think is exciting, if we're willing and able to be that visionary, as well as in what you outlined. I think there's huge opportunities for the EDA to play a role in the city, having community wealth building strategies, huge role to play in even things like trying to bring a grocery store to specific sites in the city, or partnerships with land trusts or nonprofits, which it sounds like in part may be happening with that I don't know what you would call it, revolving loan or revolving funding pool, which I think is really exciting and I think could have a lot of power, and I'm excited to see how that develops, because I think, at least in the housing world, that financing gap is huge, and I think would play a huge role in facilitating potentially even just market development, not even just nonprofit affordable housing development. Is, at the level of developing like duplexes or triplexes, if there was some financing mechanism where they aren't able to get that on the private market. I've read about localities doing similar things to try to incentivize like private market development at a smaller scale. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your time. That was a very interesting presentation, and I agree with what Michael just said. I think it's helped to be reminded of this. It's kind of like a Swiss Army knife that we need to remember that we have, and hopefully we can, I don't know if there's more sort of story sharing we need to do with the local population, businesses, nonprofits, to help them understand about this tool. I don't know, but anyway, it's definitely, this is very informative and educational. Anything else? Okay, I think we're good.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Engel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So there is no scheduled closed meeting this evening. Council will recess until 6:30 p.m. For those joining by Zoom, there is a separate link for the 6:30 meeting. Thank you.